people with Down syndrome, and some of the children you see will have amblyopia. And I had also put down a lecture on nystagmus. Actually, it's of some relevance, nystagmus, because nystagmus does affect some children with Down syndrome, but it's not very common. It's not common to see Down syndrome. It's even less common to see Down syndrome and nystagmus. I've got a talk that I did here 2 years ago on myopia control, which is proving in the UK very popular. I didn't put myopia control on the programme because myopia control is nothing to do with learning difficulties. But myopia control is a very sort of topical topic. It's something that personally I'm very excited about. In my own practice, every time we see a myopic child, we have a discussion with them about whether they want the normal correction of glasses or contact lenses, or whether they want me to get involved in myopia control and talk about the options for that. So it's up to you. On the last day, if you would rather than have a talk on nystagmus, I'm quite happy to talk about myopia control instead. What do you think?
Myopia control with lenses?
Yeah, with contact lenses.
Contact lenses.
And I'll talk about other options as well, but the main options are contact lenses. There are some spectacle lenses you can use. There are also other options like atropine, although not in the UK and probably not in this country either, I'd imagine. So we could do that. If we do that lecture, we could do it instead of nystagmus, or we could do it instead of amblyopia. So if I have a show of hands, I'll ask for 3 votes. If you would rather have the myopia control instead of nystagmus, I'll get you to put your hand up. If you'd rather have the myopia control instead of amblyopia, I'll get you to put your hand up. Or if you'd rather not have myopia control and stick with the programme as planned, then I'll get you to put your hand up. So 3 shows of hands. So firstly, put your hand up, please, if you'd rather have myopia control instead of nystagmus. 1,
I'm not
2.
sure.
Okay, not sure.
I think no one's sure yet.
Okay. Well, do you want to think about it and we'll have a vote later on in the afternoon?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll do that. Good. So let's go straight into this presentation then. I wonder if it's possible just to turn out the front light. Yeah, great. So this is where I would have started with at the beginning of the course, but we had other things that we had to do first. But this is really explaining a lot of the rationale behind the whole course, because I think the evidence-based approach has revolutionised optometry and is starting to permeate everything that we do. It's starting to permeate all the healthcare professions, and it's not something we can get away with, but something that I think we need to embrace. Here's the plan for the talk. I'm going to talk about the evidence-based movement in healthcare and how it impacts on what we as optometrists do and what you as MSc candidates learn on the MSc in a series of ways. So firstly, in measurement studies. Measuring things is optometry. It's what the word means. It's the core of what we do, is measuring refractive errors, measuring binocular vision, and so on. So how does the evidence-based movement tell us how we should be evaluating what we do in terms of measuring things? A lot of this course, and a lot of what we do as optometrists, is detecting risk factors for a condition or correlates of a condition. So a lot of the research methods that I'll be talking about today, the research about dyslexia and vision, for example, is research where people have got a group of dyslexics and compared them with a group of controls and looked at the correlates of dyslexia. So we'll talk about that research methodology. The big thing where the evidence-based approach has completely revolutionised what we do in healthcare sciences is interventions. Now, intervention is the phrase that describes any sort of treatment or correction that you give a patient. Glasses, vision therapy, you name it. And we'll talk about that and then we'll draw some conclusions. So here's the problem for us, the optometrist. We have a variety of people that are described as enthusiasts telling us what they think we should be doing. They're saying to us, I've got this new varifocal lens that is better than what you're giving your patients. You should use mine. I've got this new contact lens that is better than what you're using at the moment. You should use my contact lens. People saying, I've got this new method of doing autorefraction that's better than what you're using. You should use my instrument. People saying, I've got this new sort of vision therapy that I think you should be using that's better than what you're doing at the moment. We are faced with all of these claims and we have to assess what's right. And to do so we need to use evidence base, and there are some people who are the enemies, if you like, of evidence base. A charlatan is somebody, is defined as somebody who simply makes stuff up, who says, this new contact lens that my company makes is much better than whatever daily disposable lens you're using. And they know it's not, and they pretend it is. We can spot them, can't we? We're all used to going into shops, meeting salesmen, and we can usually spot them. The people, I think, who are difficult are the fanatics. And these are people who really believe themselves in what they're saying. And they believe absolutely that their vision therapy they're trying to tell you you should be using is really wonderful and it really helps patients. Maybe they're wrong, but if they believe it themselves, they're more likely to convince other people. The solution is evidence-based practice. But evidence-based practice is defined as integrating individual clinical expertise with the best available external evidence. Now the funny thing is, often when you talk to people and you say, is what you're doing as a practitioner evidence-based? They say, oh, I don't like this evidence-based movement because it's about researchers telling me, the clinician, what I should be doing. And there's a resistance from some clinicians to the evidence-based movement for that reason. And that reason is completely wrong, because this is the definition of evidence-based practice that starts, the first first four words, are about you. It starts with the clinician and your experience, and it integrates that with the best available evidence. So it's not about telling you what to do, it's telling you about what to consider in reaching a decision about what to do. And when you consider that, you need to consider it taking the patient preferences into account. Now, I first did this talk in evidence-based optometry about 20 years ago, and recently I've got a paper in press on evidence-based optometry. And so we had to look at the literature again, one of my students and I, and it's very interesting because it's changed in 20 years. Evidence-based practice and its definition has changed, and the way in which it's changed is 20 years ago it was saying, take account of the clinician's expertise. Yes, it still says that, but now this has got increased emphasis. Take account of what the patient wants, of what the patient's beliefs are. There might be different beliefs to yours, but they need to be taken into account. And I think that's a good thing. The other thing people often say is, well, yeah, if I'm going to use a new contact lens, then I'll look at the evidence for that new lens. But I know what I'm using works. Now, if there's one thing that evidence-based research tells us, is that often what we've always been taught and what we've always done can be wrong. It might not be the best way to do it. So we have to use evidence-based methods to investigate what we believe, our preconceptions, what we're doing today, as well as what we're thinking of doing tomorrow. So evidence-based practice is about helping us decide how to do what we do every day. Why do we need to do it? Well, the first thing is increasingly governments say it's what we've got to do. In the UK now, we're involved in optometry. In my practice, we get the National Health Service sending patients to us. If a GP, a general practitioner, a physician, refers a patient with an eye problem in my town, they don't go to the hospital, they come to us first. And we've won the bid to get paid by the government to do that work. But the government wants an evidence base before they'll pay for that sort of research. So we have to do it because the government insists we do. But also we should be interested in evidence-based practice because we should be interested in making sure that what we do is worthwhile. We need to evaluate what's most effective for future activities, and most importantly, we need to convince others that we have a serious agenda. I've never worked in a hospital, but in the UK some optometrists work in the hospital alongside ophthalmologists. The way they've gained that position and the trust of ophthalmologists is not through claiming things, but through proving that what they do is valuable with an evidence base. So let's start by in terms of background, talking about types of variables. These are things that we measure every day. And you can classify them, firstly, you can classify them in a hierarchy. So I'm starting with the most basic, most primitive variables. And the first of these is categorical. It's simply describing, for example, your population as male or female. That's one of two options. People often describe optometric data as normal or abnormal. One of two options. And that is the worst form of data you can have. It's better than nothing. Sometimes it's very useful. If you've got people and you need to describe their gender, they can only be male or female, probably. So, you know, that's fine to do. But by and large, this is primitive and you want to do better than this if you can. Nominal sometimes is relevant. For example, refractive error, describing people as myopic or astigmatic is relevant. It gets better when you can order things. So a very primitive sort of categorical variable is grading something as 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. Now that's not great, but it's a lot better than simply saying someone's normal or abnormal. So in a study we're doing at the moment, we're grading whether a cup to disc follows an isn't rule or not. And rather than just saying yes, it follows an isn't rule, or it doesn't follow an isn't rule. You know the isn't rule?
Yes.
Yeah. Rather than just saying yes, it passes or fails, we're saying to what extent does it pass or fail. We're trying to grade it, which is better than just pass or fail. There are times when a categorical variable is very relevant. If you're looking at the number of children people have, clearly you can't have 1.5 children, so it's relevant to have categorical variable. But wherever you can, you want to have better quality data. A better quality data are continuous variables. And continuous variables come in a hierarchy as well. So for example, if you're measuring near point of convergence, if you record it in centimetres, it's non-linear. It's non-linear because 1 centimetre change in convergence here requires a lot more effort than 1 centimetre out there. So if you wanted to linearise that variable, you would convert it to metre angles or to diopters, or prism diopters. The ideal continuous variable is an interval scale, is a scale where there is an absolute 0 in that scale. But the point about these variables is that they really should be the best they can be. So I'm going to talk this afternoon, last talk this afternoon, about a research paper by Krivin et al. This was a research paper on vision and dyslexia. And it was a research paper that got lots of attention in the media, and it was a research paper where they measured lots of optometric variables like refractive error, near point of convergence, motility, they measured accommodation, and for each of those variables they gathered the data as a continuous variable, but when they analysed the data they classified each of those things as simply normal or abnormal. And that, in my view as a scientist, that was a crime that they did. It was criminal to do that, because they took something which is rich data with lots of information in it, and they reduced it to the lowest form of data you can have, normal or abnormal. And the errors inherent in that are that their assumptions on what was normal or abnormal completely influence their results. It's like if somebody says to you, your second child, what are they like? You wouldn't say to them, normal, would you? You'd say, oh, they're like, you know, they're bubbly and they're spirited and they're bright and they're whatever they are. You'd paint a picture of them because they're more than just normal or abnormal. And data, a scientist should love data in the way that you love a child, almost. And so to a scientist, you know, to take something that's a continuous variable and reduce it to normal or abnormal is just a crime. But when you look at research and you judge that research, these are the sort of errors that you're looking for. These are the sort of problems that there can be in papers that you're trying to evaluate. So wherever possible, you want to look at data as a continuous variable and not reduce it. Statistics, we talk about p-values a lot. Statistics is basically asking how likely it is that the result that you found would have occurred by chance. So if there's a less than 1 in 20 probability of the result having occurred by chance, then it's taken to be significant. And that less than 1 in 20 chance is this p less than 0.05. But that's just a cut-off, isn't it? That's just a you pass my p less than 0.05 test or you fail it. So it's bad. In some papers you see they describe the result as p less than 0.05 or p more than 0.05. What you should really do is quote the actual statistical value rather than that. So it's just a number, best to quote the exact value. And of course, even if something is statistically significant, is it clinically significant? We'll talk about an example of that in dyslexia in a few moments. If, even if the p-value is not significant, it's only meaningful if they had enough participants for the effect that you're looking for to have been likely to have reached significance. So I'm going to talk about parametric statistics. Let's take an example. Let's say that somebody's brought out a new rigid gas permeable contact lens that is perfectly comfortable. It's going to revolutionise your contact lens practice. It's going to be so good that you really want to have a stock of these lenses. The lenses are fitted on keratometry. So all you need is a keratometry reading. That's how you fit it. Hypothetical, but an example. And so you want to know how many lenses you have to have in stock. They're expensive. You don't want to have more lenses in your shop than you need. You need to know what's the minimum number of lenses that I can have. And you fit them on K, so what you do is you do an analysis of your last 1,000 patients in your topographer and the K readings for those patients, and you look at the number of patients with this K reading, and what you probably find is something like this, a normal distribution, because keratometry readings are normally distributed. So you'd get most people around, what's that, around 7.8, and very few who are steeper than 7, and very few who are flatter than 8.6, say. Now, if this follows a normal distribution, and this pretty well does, then you can make some predictions. All you need to know, and any calculator can tell you this, all you need to know is what the mean is, which is 7.8, and the standard deviation. As soon as you know the mean and the standard deviation, you can say what is one standard deviation more than the mean, one standard deviation less than the mean, two standard deviations less than the mean, two more, and so on. And as soon as you know that, then you can make some predictions. Because with a normal distribution, 68% of the population lie within plus or minus one standard deviation of the mean. So, coming back to the example of this new wonderful contact lens, all you would need to do is if you said, okay, my budget is going to allow me to stock them from 7.4 to 8.0, that will fit 68% of your patients. If you say my budget will allow me, I want to be able to fit 95%, 95% of the population lie within plus or minus 2 standard deviations of the mean. So to fit 95% of your population, you would need lenses that ranged from 7 to 8.4. As long as you had that, you could predict how many you could fit. Now let's say you enjoy doing this activity so much, you think, I want to do some research. I've got 2 shops. One shop in Haifa and one shop in Tel Aviv. I think that the Haifa people are bigger. I think they've got a slightly different shaped cornea. Is my Haifa data different to my Tel Aviv data? And you could answer that by doing comparative statistics. Oh, sorry, I'll come to that in a moment. So this is what I've just said. Yeah, if we go back to this, what you could do is if somebody had a keratometry reading of 6.9, they are more than 2 standard deviations below the mean. So they fall outside these 95% range. So you would say that this person was abnormal because they lie outside the 95% population. And that's a way of defining normal. In fact, in science, it's the standard way of defining normal. But if somebody is outside the range that covers 95% of the population, they are considered to be atypical. And we'll talk later about the 95% limits of agreement. But let's talk now about what I just mentioned. If you've got a practice in Tel Aviv, a practice in Haifa, you think they're different. Are they significantly different? So what you'd do is you'd look at your population from Tel Aviv, and then you'd look at your data from your population from Haifa, and let's say the average is different. The average keratometry in Tel Aviv is 7.8, the average in Haifa is 8.25. And what you would do is you would test whether they're different by comparing the means, and the statistics you do, the t-test it's called, compares the means taking account of the standard deviation. And it tells you whether they are likely to be different by random chance, or whether they are so unlikely to be different by chance that it's a less than 5% chance of them being different. And that would be significant. Now, the other thing I want to mention by way of introduction is the placebo effect, because we're going to talk about the placebo effect a great deal in this course. How big is the placebo effect? Well, it's just massive. Everyone I've ever known who's researched the placebo effect has been stunned by how large it is. And it's very interesting, because until the 1900s, most medicines had no pharmacological effect. And yet you look at all cultures, and healers were held in very high esteem. People believed in them despite their drugs largely not working. Even today, a third of drugs prescribed in America are placebos. I don't think there's anything special about America. I think that's true of England as well, and I'm sure it's true of Israel as well. Most drugs that we think make us better don't. Not most, a third that we think make us better don't. If you look at research that's evaluated the effect of interventions, and you say, okay, if we do properly controlled, randomized controlled trials, compare them with uncontrolled studies, you find that uncontrolled studies overestimate treatments working by 4 to 5 times. So when I said in my first talk today that in this course I'm going to concentrate on interventions that have a randomized controlled trial underlying them, that's why. Because if you just look at a treatment and you don't have a properly controlled study, then you'll think that it works. And tomorrow I'm going to talk about optometric vision therapy that uses perceptual training. And there have been some recent papers on this from the States that are very critical of the research that's been done, the same on oculomotor training. Very critical because of a lack of good randomized controlled trials, because it could be in this 4 to 5 times overestimating the likelihood of a benefit. People sometimes say, but what I'm doing, I'm measuring their eye movements with an eye tracking instrument, so I don't need to do a placebo-controlled trial because it's an objective measure. There's nothing magical about objective measures. Placebos can affect objective responses such as blood pressure. My brother, both my brothers are doctors, and my next brother down, the first research study he did was published in the leading medical journal in the UK, The Lancet. It was a research study where he looked at the effect of hypnosis on women having a hysterectomy, their womb removed, whilst under anaesthesia. And he looked at the effect of hypnotic suggestion on objective measures, like the number of days they spent in hospital, their temperature after surgery, things you would think they couldn't influence. And the ones that had the hypnotic suggestion under anaesthesia got better than the ones that were just played music under anaesthesia. Very interesting study, but he, like many others, have shown that the placebos can affect objective responses. People sometimes say, my patients, I'm not worried about the placebo effect with them because they're so intelligent. It's not true. Intelligent people are just as prone to the placebo effect. Some people have said to me, where I work, my patients are so stupid that I'm not worried about the placebo effect. It's not true either. You get the placebo effect, placebo responses are found in animals as well as humans. I'm not likening anyone's patients to animals. Placebo responses are not linked to differences in intelligence, and placebos show similar side effects. So if you put people in a research study and you say we're comparing a new drug for blood pressure with a placebo, and we're going to be looking at people to see if they get side effects like headaches. People who get the placebo will get side effects often as much as those that get the active drug. So when you're evaluating studies, the quality of journals is a guide. Ideally it will be in an interdisciplinary peer-reviewed journal, as we spoke about this morning. If you want to look at how to assess a research paper and say how good it is, this is a terrific organisation. It's a web-based organisation, CASP, Critical Appraisal Skills Programme. It is designed for you. It's designed for clinicians who are not evidence-based practitioners but want to learn more about the evidence-based approach, and it teaches you how to evaluate a research paper and critically appraise it. So when you're doing a group comparison, if you're comparing a group of dyslexics with a group of good readers, was there any selection bias? Did they select the dyslexics from an upmarket area and the controls from a poorer area? Are the groups matched for any confounding variables? This is so crucial. So much